Yeah, and let's start off with the reigning division champs, the Detroit
Mm-hmm.
Lions. They won their second consecutive NFC North. Last season marked the second consecutive year in which they've had 10 wins, which is the first time they had ever done that in franchise history. It also marked the first time they had won a Thanksgiving game since
Mm-hmm.
2016. As we enter year 3 of the Dan Campbell era, after the Lions have kind of been the joke of the NFL in a lot of ways for almost our entire lifetimes, right? I mean, going back, you can go back to, even our grandparents. I mean, they've had up and down periods, but for the most part, I mean, this has been a franchise marked by their struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Campbell, when he came in, took over the he took over the franchise. He talked about changing the mentality around this team. And in 2 years, I mean, he brought them to a 15-2 record and, to the divisional round of the playoffs as the 1 seed. I guess my first kind of, not our burning question tonight, but my first kind of overarching question is there anything left for Dan Campbell to prove? Anything left for him to change for this team so they can, kind of make a larger playoff push?
I mean, kind of to state the obvious, but winning a Super Bowl, right? Like, Lions have never won one. They've never even been to a Super Bowl, right? So just getting there is half the battle. Winning it would isolate him as one of the best coaches of all time, just because you took a laughing stock of the NFL for the past 70 years and finally made them something memorable and something that to be threatened and intimidated by, right? Like the Lions, for the longest time, like, yeah, they had superstars. They had Barry Sanders. They had Calvin Johnson. They had a couple of other guys in that span as well. And Ndamukong Suh early in his career was looking like a Hall of Fame caliber player, and probably is, not first ballot, but probably will be in the Hall of Fame just with how dominant he was his entire career. But outside of those big playmakers, they've kind of just been chumps. And he has taken a team of chumps and turned them into superstars, studs, Pro Bowl caliber players, which I know Pro Bowl people think it's a popularity contest. With how they do the voting in the NFL versus every other league, it's not. It's players, it's coaches, it's executives are voting. Fan vote is only 25% of the equation now. So making a Pro Bowl, which there's a couple of funny ones in there. Obviously, Tyler Huntley is one of those. This is another conversation for another time. But still, they have those guys on this team that, when you look past the box score, are perfect role players for what this team is looking for. And I think that's kind of what makes the Lions who they are, is that they take these players who've kind of been misfits or castaways in other programs, and they find perfect situations for them here. And that starts with Dan Campbell, with how he sets a tone with grit, with being a dog, with biting off people's kneecaps, which everyone laughed at that in 2021 when he had his first press conference. But I bet every team in the NFL now wishes they were biting the kneecaps off of other teams, because they do it better than anybody else has done in the past 10 years of NFL play.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get into that quote in a second, but I just wanted to, I'm a Jets fan, you're a Cards fan, but I wanted to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of a Lions fan that's around our age, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Dan Campbell took over the team, he brought them to a 3-13-1 record in his first season. If you're someone our age or maybe a little bit younger, you were alive to remember an 0-16 Lions team, right? That Dan Campbell was a member of as a player. So for a 3-13-1 record 4 years ago and an 0-16 record, early on in your lifetime, to now hearing you say the next thing that they have to prove is whether they can win a Super Bowl in just 4 years' time. I mean, how insane must that be for a Lions fan?
That's got to be nuts. I mean, like, if that was me as a Cardinals fan, like, I remember, the Cardinals are like working their way back. But besides that Super Bowl run and then the NFC Championship run, the Cardinals have been dog shit. The Jets are kind of in the same boat. Besides the 2009 and 2010 seasons, kind of been dog shit, right? Like a few playoff appearances here and there, some glimmers of hope. Same thing with the Lions. They made the playoffs in 2015 or 2016 when Matt Stafford and Golden Tate were connecting nonstop every game. Like, you have those moments of hope, but now the Lions have pushed the envelope, and it's no longer hope. This is the standard. And I hope for you and my sake, the Jets and Cardinals can make that happen. But for the Lions fan that has suffered for years and years, and some of them their entire lives, even people that are 40 and 50, they've been suffering. Now to see that come to fruition and seeing them get as close as they did, almost blowing out the 49ers and then throwing that game away. Injury set them back last year against the Commanders. If they were fully healthy, I think they're winning that Super Bowl. I don't think the Eagles even come close to coming within 2 possessions of that Lions team last year. But, man, it's like they just need 1 or 2 breaks, and they're there. And I don't know if that's going to happen this year with how much turnover this team from an organizational standpoint is going to face. But maybe Dan Campbell has enough juice that it won't matter, that he can turn that corner and say, I don't care how much adversity we're going through. I don't care who we lost or who we're bringing in. We are taking it another step further this upcoming season, and we're going to Super Bowl. We'll see what happens. There's more question marks for me than solidified answers, and we'll get into that as we talk about the Lions. But, man, if there's any coach I would put stock into subvert all expectations and exceed them, it's Dan Campbell.
Yeah, and you going back to the bite your kneecaps quote, obviously, like you said, it kind of got memed when he first took over the team, but now we're really seeing that, anyone who doubted the bite your kneecaps quote kind of got bit in the butt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only was that quote describing just the resilience of this team and just how much they put 110%, how much they want to kind of hone in their effort for every game, but it also kind of translated directly to the style of football that they've played on the field. So could you kind of elaborate as to, how they've kind of metaphorically bitten the kneecaps of their opponents through their playbook?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously this is going to change with John Morton taking over as the offensive coordinator, coming over from Denver. But Ben Johnson the past 3 years has really established one of the most true grit football offenses we've ever seen. NFL is obviously becoming a high-octane passing offense, spread the ball out, punch it down your throat through the pass game and RPOs. But he really took a step back and said, how can I modernize traditional football with 3 yards in a cloud of dust while making it standardized with motion, with 12 personnel rather than 21 or your traditional 11 personnel that we're seeing in the NFL today? How can he use similar schemes and similar looks to manipulate your defense into favorable looks that he wants? And we're going to break those down right now. And this is as true as football gets, right? He was run first mentality. They were 5th and 7th in run rates on 1st and 2nd down, respectively. You don't see that level of percentage run plays in the NFL on a successful team the way that the Lions did. They were 5th in yards before contact per attempt. So that's before running back gets touched. How many yards they're getting? They got 1.6. That was 5th. That shows how good your offensive line has to be and how in step they are with each other. Not just the individual players, but how they work as a unit. They were first in play action rate on all downs. 38% play action rate is bonkers in today's NFL because you can run that from gun and everyone knows it's play action. This is a team that got under center over 57% of the time and ran play action over just at 38% of the time, right? Like, that's not unheard of in today's NFL, but those numbers is so against the status quo that almost every NFL offense has become. That's massive. And then if we look at 1st and 2nd down for play action, they were 1st and 6th in play action rate on 1st and 2nd down, respectively, right? Like, just so against the grain of what every NFL offense has become that is creating these tendencies that teams can't adjust for, and it's showing with how they're scoring, how they're getting yards, and on 4th down, just how they're pushing the envelope, right? So if we look at 4th down, they were 1st in the red zone on 4th down in terms of how often they're going for it at almost 50%, 47.8. So even though they're in field goal range and they can take the easy 3 points, they're going for it almost half the time, which is insane. Like, analytics would say otherwise, like, hey, take the 3 points. But Dan Campbell's like, nope, we're going to punch it down your throat. We're going to get a first down, and we're going to get points out of it. And then in that no man's land range where you're kind of in field goal range, but you're also kind of in punt range, but you don't want to punt it too far and put it into the end zone. We call that your own 45 to the other team's 45 in no man's zone. They were tied for first in going for it on fourth down at 37.5%. This is a team that ran the table when it came to changing how analytics is thought of in football, changing how we think about fourth down, because Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell came together and said, look, why are we going to restrict ourselves to 3 downs when we can have 4 downs to run our offense how we want? And that's why their run rate is so high. Their play action rate was so high. It's because instead of playing in 3 downs where you can only run it once or run play action once, they're like, okay, we could run it twice. We could run play action twice. And depending on what we gain on those, we could run it 3 or 4 times, or we can run 3 or 4 play actions. Or when teams are scrambled and they think we're going to run, we'll pass it 4 downs in a row if it gets to that. We don't care. We're going to make plays happen because we're treating it as a 4-down game instead of 3 and then punt or 3 and then field goal, which a lot of teams unfortunately get stuck thinking like that. And they get stuck thinking conservatively and that we need points. We need points. Well, Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson said, well, we need points. And 6 points or 7 points is better than 3. So let's get points that way rather than settling for 3. And that has revolutionized the game across the NFL just within the past 3 years. And you're seeing the fourth down go rates spike for every team across the NFL, except maybe 2 or 3. But it's incredible what this mentality and how this offense is structured has revolutionized football in a revolutionary period that's become more pass heavy and has really flipped the script from run heavy offenses to let's put our quarterback in the best position possible. And the Lions do that bar none better than anybody else.
And I wanted to talk about that quarterback, obviously being Jared Goff. This is going to be year 5 of him on the Lions. Once he finishes this season, he'll have played as many in Detroit that he did in LA. He played 5 seasons in LA. Last season specifically, you look at his stats over his career. I wouldn't really say that he, made a huge jump, like personal statistics wise, from LA to Detroit. Last season, he did score his, career high passing touchdowns. He had his best yards per attempt, but in terms of yardage and everything, it's pretty level throughout the board. It's not really better or worse. But he's obviously a lot more successful games-wise. He's winning a lot more games. So can you kind of elaborate on how this specific Dan Campbell system has either helped a guy like Jared Goff or how Jared Goff has kind of been a big piece of this system succeeding?
Absolutely. And if I could compare it to the NBA in a really weird way, I would say Matt Stafford is like Steph Curry in the same way that Jared Goff is DeMar DeRozan, where like DeMar DeRozan is going to pull up from mid-range. He's going to hit layered shots. He might shoot the 3 here and there, and he's going to run to the rack here and there, where Steph Curry can kind of score from all over the field, but he's better in the deep to mid area than he is the short game. That's kind of how you have to view Matt Stafford versus Jared Goff, where Matt Stafford fits that Sean McVay style offense where we're going to run duo, we're going to run blast, we're going to run power at you all game long, and then we're going to tell Matt Stafford, hey, now that they're creeping up, fit it over the top of the linebackers and underneath the safeties, or just take a deep shot against them. And Matt Stafford has elevated that Rams offense that way. Kind of like Steph Curry, he elevates Golden State by his range and his ability to get to the bucket in that short intermediate range. But the deep ball is always a threat, or the deep shot is always a threat. Or Chris Middleton, or excuse me, not Chris Middleton. That's another guy I was thinking of. DeMar DeRozan kind of takes advantage of that mid-range, and he'll go to the rack and shoot threes here and there, but he'll just kind of fit it over defenders in that mid-range spot. That's what Jared Goff excels at. That short game, that intermediate game, like, he is one of the best intermediate throwers in the NFL, whether it's over the middle or on the sidelines, like, and he's working on designed rollouts or he's standing firm in the pocket. Like, he does such a great job layering the football over linebackers and right in front of the safeties. And it helps when you have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. Tim Patrick came in last year and like helped in that area a little bit. But if you need to take the top off the defense, you can throw it up to Jameson Williams because of the speed. And Jared Goff is not going to throw it on a rope 30 to 40 yards downfield, but he will loft it right over the safety perfectly into the bucket for Jamison Williams. And he can get busy in the short area too. And that's kind of what I like about Jared Goff is that even though he's quote unquote limited in terms of arm strength, his arm talent that's like kind of people like, if you have a strong arm, you have great arm talent. That's not necessarily the case. Like, we'll talk about Brock Purdy in the NFC West episode. His arm talent's crazy because of how he can layer throws. Jared Goff is in that same conversation of the arm angles, the arm slots, the off-platform versus on, and fitting balls in where they need to and fitting passes into tight windows. Jared Goff is really, really solid in that category. And that's amplified by how this offense is run with the play action, with the aggressiveness on fourth down, with where they target guys in the red zone and how they leverage the run game and weaponize the run game to help the pass game. He is perfect for the system. And that's why it's one of the best win-win trades in NFL history. The Rams got a Super Bowl. The Lions got the perfect quarterback for the type of offense they want to run.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's funny. I wanted to ask you that when we did our NFC West pod. Like, it was the Stafford Goff trade like the biggest win-win trade that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
I would say so.
Awesome.
Absolutely. No, it's funny because Jared Goff was at that point in his career where he was kind of tailing off. Stafford was still doing well, but people were like, he's getting older. Does he still have it? And at the time, I was shocked that the Lions got 2 first-rounders and Jared Goff in that trade, especially since he's almost a decade younger than Matt Stafford. But in terms of what the strength was the Rams needed and what the Lions needed, I think the value now was completely fair, and the Lions are greatly established now for the long term, and the Rams got their Super Bowl. Now, can they get back there? That's another conversation for the NFC West episode. But in terms of the Lions, their window is going to be much more wide open than any other team with a high-end caliber quarterback. Like, Jared Goff is like floating in that top 10 range, like probably borderline, but you don't have to overpay him now because you know what he can do. You know the value he brings, and he still performs at a high level despite that. Like, and he's okay with taking a little bit of a pay cut compared to the rest of the quarterback market because he knows how this offense operates and what he needs to do for it. And that's what makes this Lions team so exciting, even with the turnover, is that no matter who steps in at OC, this offense, in terms of the players and X's and O's that are there, is perfectly tailored for Jared Goff. That if you're an OC and you come in, you're not going to be able to change much. And which is fine for someone like John Morton, because you have Dan Campbell who's going to help usher them in and say, hey, this is how we do things here. I want you to have your input here and there, but this is what works for us. Find some wrinkles, find some, analytics that can help us get a break here and there. But this is our mentality. This is how we run. And Jared Goff is the perfect guy to help us lead us to where we want to go, which eventually is a Super Bowl win.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the fourth down aggressiveness. Obviously, like you said earlier, the Lions have kind of revolutionized the game, and we're seeing a lot of other teams adopt this ambition to go for it on fourth down rather than just, punt or kick a field goal if you're in range. Obviously, with any sort of big strategic trend in any sport, right, there's going to be the first team that does it gets a big advantage. Everyone starts to catch up. And then once that kind of becomes the, for lack of a better term to borrow from video games, like once that kind of becomes like the meta, right, it's less of an advantage and more of just what you run. How much longer do you feel like Detroit has before most of the teams that have already started running it or have yet to implement it? How much more time do you think Detroit has before they kind of lose the advantage of their aggressiveness?
I think that's an awesome question. Number one, I would say that the time is unlimited because Ben Johnson took a head coaching job, right? Like, it's like, as much as it is Dan Campbell running like the system and the mentality, Ben Johnson was the genius behind the X's and O's of what made this offense great. So now teams, they know how aggressive they are. Now they have to learn potentially a whole different system. Like, I personally don't think that. I think Dan Campbell is going to keep this system and the tendencies relatively similar and let Morden plug in the X's and O's to fit the system he has in place with high play action rate, high fourth down go percentage, keeping the offensive line the focal point of this offense, right? Like, he's going to tell John to run this offense in that style, but bring in your own kind of rhythm to it. Bring in your own, like, hey, we ran a lot of 12 personnel last year. If you want to run more 11, by all means do it, because if you're running more 11, the defense is going to run a lighter defense. So you could still get run angles and run advantages that you didn't necessarily have in the previous offense. But in terms of numbers and math, you will have it because of the defenses you're going against and how we're running the offense, right? So with that, I don't think teams are going to catch up because the offense is going to change. Now, it depends how innovative John is going to get with his offense from year one to year two, but I would give it at minimum a year for teams to catch up, because this is going to be a new offensive system, even if it's slight percentage changes in personnel packages and types of plays they're running in certain areas of the field. But teams are already expecting this offense is going to be different. And if they guess how it's going to be differently incorrectly, this is going to open up a whole bag of worms for this offense to take advantage of. And like John Morden, like, this Broncos offense was dog shit his first year there and was much better his second year there when he was the passing coordinator there. And like, granted, like, you can say, oh, you're going from Russell Wilson to Bo Nix, and Bo Nix elevated this offense. Like, there were a lot of factors into why this offense changed, and how they called the offenses called the offense was completely different in 2024 than it was in 2023. So you could expect that change to still happen within the Lions, because last year the Broncos didn't really have many tight ends to utilize. The Lions have 2 or 3 that you could plug in any play of the game, and that offense is still going to run on schedule as it does in any other personnel package. So it's going to be real. I think the first 6 weeks for this Lions offense is going to be really critical to how we think they're going to run it. And then from the middle of the season to the end of the season, seeing how teams adjust is really going to tell us what the longevity of the aggressiveness and the innovativeness of this offense is really going to spell for the next couple of years. But I would put money on it. You got another 2 to 3 years at least. And that's if John Morden stays around past that, because if he does well, he's going to get a head coaching gig somewhere else.
Yeah. And before we get into the rest of this season, I kind of want to talk about how they finished last season, specifically on the injury side with their playoff run, right? There were a lot of guys that helped them get to that 15-2 record that were not available for the one playoff game they ended up playing against Washington. So could you kind of talk about, some of the key losses that the Lions faced, and maybe how those losses coming back this year can kind of get them back on the right path?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this a little bit with the Jets, because Aaron Glenn, who was the DC in Detroit, is now the head coach of the Jets. But 13 total defensive players on IR by week 17. 6 of them are starters, 5 of them contributors. But I think what made Aaron Glenn and this defense really transform was his willingness to get away from what he's used to running. And they switched from zone, which they were running more man than everyone else in the NFL. But once all those injuries happened, he said, fuck it. We're going to run man-to-man. I'm going to let my sub guys come in and rush the passer. We're going to run unique pressure packages and blitzes, and we're going to get after it. And even with all the injuries, they were second in pressure rate generated at 34.2%, and they were second in man coverage rate at 37%. And they were first down in cover one, which is one of the most rare defenses you see in the NFL, which cover one is just one safety over the top. And sometimes that means you bring five pass rushers, or you bring 4 and you have one of the linebackers sit in the low hole, or a safety come down and sit in the low hole. They were 35.2% in cover one calls. That's insane. And cover 3, I know a lot of people say too high is becoming the meta in the NFL. Cover 3 is still the most run defense in the NFL, because teams will come out at too high and then post-snap rotate down into one high. They were 31st in cover 3 calls at 20.9%. Cover 3, just across the NFL, if you take out the Lions, is ran 58% of the time. So almost 3 times less than the NFL average. They're running the most basic coverage call in the NFL. And that just speaks to Aaron Glenn and how he trusts his guys, even the backup saying, hey, we're going to allow you to lock up man-to-man. I'm going to dial up a pressure or a stunt and let guys get to work, and we're going to see what happens. And that also helped on their first down blitz rate. When they were 3rd and 6 to 10, kind of that middle to long range, they were first in blitz rate at 68.7%. Like, that's just stupid. Like, no one's running. Like, normally 3rd and long, you're like, great, we'll sit back, we'll let our 4 get after it. He said, nope, we're applying even more pressure. I'm leaving everyone on an island and saying, our pressure is better than your quarterback against pressure. We're going to make something happen. And until that Commanders game in the divisional round, they did. Like, they were awesome in those situations. But you can't run man coverage against Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and Cliff Kingsbury. You just can't do it all game, and we saw what happened in that as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into their dark horse, you highlighted a guy on the offensive line, Christian Mahogany.
Yes, sir. Guy? Dude, I love Mahogany. When he was coming out of Boston College, he was not my highest rated interior guy. I can actually if you want to pull it up on your end while I talk about him. Mm-hmm. But in my interior offensive line blog, I talk about his size and his ability to move at his size and just create massive rushing lanes. Now he's going to get a chance to start because now Kevin Zeitler's gone. Graham Glasgow might be moving to center. Maybe it's Tate Ratledge. But either way, a guard spot is open. He's going to take full advantage of that. He's 6'3", 322 in terms of his combine measurements. He might be a little bit heavier, might be a little bit lighter. But either way, he did not have a large sample size of snaps last year. He only got 75 blocking snaps in the regular season. But on those 75, he was 21st in overall run blocking. And this is across the entire NFL. So this is guys who even played one snap and had a kick-ass snap, right? Like, he was 21st in overall, 15th in pass blocking. He was tied 22nd in run blocking out of over hundreds of interior offensive linemen. And he was one of 9 linemen in the entire NFL, regardless of snap count, to have an 80-plus run block and pass block grade. Like, that is, you're entering elite level. Like, Lane Johnson had that. Jordan Mailata had that. Chris Lindstrom, maybe not Chris Lindstrom. Creed Humphrey had that. There's a couple of other guys. Quentin Nelson, I think, had that this year. He dropped off a little bit, but this year he came back. He was another guy that had that. A lot of top-name offensive linemen fit into that category. He was one of them. Yes, much lower snap count, but it's still the same principle. And in the one full game that he played 65 snaps. He started in for Kevin Zeitler, who was hurt. He got an 82.5 pass block grade and a 70.4 run block grade. And we've talked about it in other episodes. An 80-plus PFF grade is great, and a 70-plus is good. 60 and above is average, is what we look at. PFF is the grades are not like school where 65 is or 64 is failing. Like, a 60 PFF grade means you're average or above average, right? Depending on where you rank. And he was good to great in both categories. This is someone you're now asking to start and fits what this offensive line is looking to do to defenses, and that's create rushing lanes and forces defensive tackles to second guess, is it runners and pass, and that's going to slow down their pass rush. So someone who is a bit slower like Christian Mahogany is going to get an extra split second to get into his kick step, get depth, and guess what? You're not bull rushing someone who's 322 unless you're a top 5 defensive tackle in the league like Dexter Lawrence, Quinton Williams, Chris Jones. Like, you are not bull rushing someone with that size and that mass and strength. It's just not happening. It's physics 101, right? Like, he is going to be so fundamental for this Detroit offensive line. And I believe he was a 7th round pick. I had him graded as a day 2 pick. And the fact they got him in the 7th round, let me just double, he was a 6th round pick. But either way, just unbelievable in terms of what he was able to bring to the table in terms of size and athleticism. And now he gets a chance to start in a repolished offense where teams are going to be second guessing themselves anyways. I think he might be a top 10 interior offensive lineman at the end of this year. And that's a hot take because there's a lot of damn good ones out there. But just with like it's 1+1 is 3. I talk about that all the time in football. This is the epitome of that down to the position level from a micro level. He's going to have an awesome season, I think.
Yeah. And finally, the burning question for Detroit. Obviously, after a great season that they've had, it's hard to pinpoint downsides, but if you had to, it's obviously when your team has such a great run, everyone kind of wants a piece of the pie, right? So obviously we saw Ben Johnson go to division rival Chicago. We saw Aaron Glenn, which we talked about on our last episode, go to the New York Jets. And like you said, I mean, this offensive scheme and the defensive schemes are, they're flexible enough where Dan Campbell can bring in a new guy and do his best to meld the system that was running with what a new coordinator wants to bring in. But you still lose some nuances of the coaches that helped bring you to 15-2. So even with those absences, do you feel like Detroit has a realistic shot of going 3 years in a row as NFC North champions?
I believe so. And just because, Ben Johnson was a top 3 OC, if not the best OC in the NFL. Aaron Glenn was the top 3 DC, maybe number 1 with how adaptable he was with all the injuries the past 2 years, right? So you lose 2 of the most innovative and effective coordinators in the NFL. But who they're bringing in, John Morton alone, and how this offense is going to shift is going to give them advantages because, like I said, defenses are going to second-guess themselves. But Kelvin Shepard as a defensive coordinator, he's homegrown. Like he was a role-playing NFL player, mainly a special teams guy, got in a couple of games and was okay in the time he got. But like we talked about in the AFC East episode, you see guys who were okay, below average NFL players who turn into great coaches. I think Kelvin Shepard plugged in very easily as DC for the Lions. Now, like we've seen with some other former players who became DCs that struggled early on, I think Kelvin Shepard is going to have his struggles, but the offense is going to help supplement that and kind of put a Band-Aid on it and said, look, we're unpredictable too. So while you figure it out, we're going to force defenses to figure us out as we go throughout this process. So I think the Lions can absolutely win the NFC North again. I think they will win the NFC North again just because of how loaded this roster is top to bottom. I think defense will take a little bit of a step back because normally when you replace a DC, that's what happens. Sometimes the offense gets better because offense is typically a lot less predictable than defense. But I think if anyone can make this defense take a step forward, it would be someone like Kelvin Shepard, who is a former player, was hired by the Lions and was the assistant DC and has worked his way up through this culture and through this program. And now you have a pretty much fully healthy defense and you kind of get to run exactly what you want. Like, for all we know, Kelvin Shepard could be more zone heavy than Aaron Glenn was. And that alone puts in a wrinkle to what these offenses are expecting against this type of defense. And I think for those reasons alone, just the unpredictability is going to be enough to give them an NFC North win. And then you add in the talent of this team, top to bottom on top of that. It's a perfect recipe for another NFC North win.